Okay, so I guess first of all, the CNCF Code of Conduct applies to this meeting. So be respectful of each other and treat each other with respect. And yeah, please add yourself to the attendees list of the meeting. And do anyone want to be note taker for the meeting?
I can take notes today.
Yeah, thank you. So if first of all, welcome and happy to see Leo and Deepankar. If I correct me if I say it wrong, but welcome to the first project meeting. I'll just introduce myself, and maybe we can take a quick round if you want. So my name is Jakob or Jacob. I work at Luna as a platform engineer, and I have been writing a thesis about sustainable or what is called carbon efficient cluster autoscaling in Kubernetes. So that's kind of my path into this environment. Yeah, maybe Martin, you can continue.
Sure. Hi, I'm Marta Pacerkowska. I work in a Norwegian grocery delivery platform called Uda. I've been different flavors of sysadmin during the last 11 years, and I've been working with Kubernetes for around 6 years now, maybe. And I've always been interested in sustainability, so that those two things together led me here. I'm really excited to be working on this project.
Yeah, and Leo and Deepankar, if you want to say anything.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Leo. I'm one of the chairs for the CNCF Technical Advisory Group for Environmental Sustainability. And I contributed to Kubernetes for 3 years, but it's kind of stopped for the last half year or so. But this was like my first open source project I contributed to Kubernetes. So I know quite a few people in the community. So if you need to reach out to anybody, let me know. But good to see this project getting started. Awesome.
Thank you.
So, hi, my name is Dipankar, and I have been working as a DevOps engineer in some RTCamp, and I am currently contributing to Kubernetes, sorry, not Kubernetes, CNCF's Green Reviews, and creating my own project as well, community, and yeah, something doing on this community part as well.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you for joining today. The first topic on the agenda is an introduction to the project. So I think I'll just share my screen and then quickly go through what this project is all about. Oh, I have to change the system permissions.
You need to restart Zoom, probably, right?
Yeah. See you.
It's the first time either of us is hosting, so I was expecting technical issues, actually more than we had so far.
No worries.
Okay, maybe I can do it now. Let me see. Yeah. All right. So yeah, the project is called Best Practices for Environmentally Sustainable Kubernetes Clusters. The reason we're doing this is, of course, because we have quite a crisis around global warming and higher and higher levels of CO2 in the atmosphere, so we kind of have to reduce that. And the goal of this project is giving Kubernetes administrators or operators some tools or some recommended guidelines for kind of starting to reduce the impact of their Kubernetes clusters. It is not to like the scope is the goal is not to create new tools, but it is more like to collect and elaborate on what's available and what impact existing tools and methods can create. Leo?
So is it also about like envisioning sort of what is missing, where Kubernetes could be going, or is this just about this like the status that we have right now? Because I think there are things that we need may not exist already or are like in the works. So
yeah, I don't think envisioning new things is exactly inside the scope of the project. But of course, if you get a good idea about how Kubernetes could be more green or how something a new feature in Kubernetes that would be great for sustainability, I think you can just like the CNCF community is open, so you can of course just maybe create an issue in the Kubernetes
that's fair.
project.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's part of the scope now to kind of figure out what new features are needed. Yeah, Mante?
Yeah, but I agree with Jacob. Also, it's a natural question because we will be talking about optimizations of all sorts, right? So I'm pretty sure that at least one idea will pop up on, oh, it would be nice to have this, or it would be nice to have that. So if there might be ideas for follow-ups, obviously coming from this little the final document that we create, I hope.
Yeah, me too. Hopefully we find something that could be very useful and maybe does not exist, and then we could talk with people in the CNCF organization. Currently we have only kind of have cloud-based Kubernetes cluster inside the scope, so this means no on-premise clusters. And that's basically because I think I only know about cloud-based Kubernetes clusters, but I guess the kind of the implications of kind of owning the hardware, having control over it, is it is a different methods that you can use in those cases.
So one more question. So you mean with cloud-based, you mean public cloud-based?
Yeah.
Not okay.
Should we specify that explicitly, you think, since you're asking about it?
Yeah, maybe, because from my understanding, cloud also includes bare metal things.
Yeah.
Also, I had one question.
Yeah.
Why are we not considering bare metal as well? Any specific reasons might be there?
I mean, it should be easier, to be honest, I think. Bare metal.
Okay.
So I don't know. I think like there's a lot of like extra complexity if we look at public cloud, to be honest, because we don't know the underlying infrastructure. With bare metal, it's a lot easier because you don't need to. I mean, you have like access to those metrics, right? So
So you can run bare metal in the public cloud, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So I guess it's, yeah, Martin, what?
No, finish your thought if you haven't.
I just think it was to make sure, like, because it is two different things, and we just wanted to kind of reduce the scope and the focus to make sure that we actually got something out and could start in a kind of a small place. And this doesn't mean that we never should make something for non-public cloud.
Okay, so it is basically for the initial phases, and then we can roll out to multiple months. Nah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
And if I can also add, I think those are great questions to ask, and I think what the starting point that Jacob and me we had was our experience as Kubernetes users and operators, which is both mostly public cloud. So thinking about the areas where we would be able to contribute the most, I think that's why we landed on this. But I think if it makes, I would assume that if it makes most sense to change that to something else, then I'm sure we can do that.
Yeah. Agree. Leo?
Yeah, so from what I understanding,
Max,
obviously
can
we
you
don't look
mute?
at. Wait, I can put him on mute. So from my understanding now, basically how it's framed is, for the most part, we look at bare metal because we can have bare metal instances in the cloud, in public cloud environments. And basically what you were trying to get rid of is caring about all the hardware stuff, right? So like data center infrastructure and so on. But this is not interesting for this project anyways, because we are looking at Kubernetes, right? So I think probably we are like all on the same page, I think. I suspect. So
Yeah, probably. I think.
yeah, one thing to ask is, because there are like different Kubernetes offerings, if this is like part of this project. Because I mean, first maybe your thoughts on this.
What do you mean by different offerings?
Yeah, AKS in comparison to EKS, in comparison to other Kubernetes offerings, how they differ and things.
So I think both AKS, EKS, and like all these different variants of Kubernetes are included in the scope. Yeah.
Okay. Because I would argue that this bloats, or it could bloat the scope a little bit, because they're kind of similar at the end, right? They are all based on Kubernetes, but
Mm.
a little bit different. And at the end, we don't really care too much about cloud provider offerings. We care about the open source tool.
Yeah.
So we could slim down the scope a little bit if we just focus on Kubernetes.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, we would only like focus on the stuff that is the same between the different offerings. Like I think if that's what you're trying to say. If we would
Yeah.
take the specifics of EKS, for example, I don't think we would do that. We would only take like open source and similar stuff.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah. So the goal is to, as we've talked about, create a kind of a guide or a best actionable list of best practices. And we imagine that being kind of a document or maybe a web page inside the CNCF Environmental Sustainability website, where we kind of have various sections, each section covering one area. So, for example, one section could be on cluster autoscaling and some best practices around that, or right-sizing clusters or workloads. So there will be, yeah, it will be kind of be like that, we imagine. And we would maybe add background information where possible. So yeah.
One more question to this. So the
Yes.
background information would be part of the guide, or would this be, where should this be? Because background info, or is this like,
we imagine it would be part of the guide. So kind of
okay,
where possible, kind of where if we have researched something and figured something out, and now we have a good understanding about why we create this recommendation, then we want to write kind of the knowledge that we have obtained about why this recommendation down. So the reasoning behind it.
that's good.
Yeah. But yeah, of course, it will not be kind of a lexicon or a very, very extensive information for each. It will, I guess, and we don't have, I guess most people don't have time to write that long background information or detailed as well. But so it will be up to the individual contributors how much background information will be provided. Yeah, so I think that's basically it. Is there any kind of questions to the project and what it is about and what it's not about? Yeah, Leo?
Not to the charter or the proposal, but maybe for the roadmap in terms of how do you would like to start. But perhaps this is already like the next point you would like to talk about.
Yeah, I guess yeah. So the next point on the agenda would be to kind of get started on what areas and what yeah, what areas people think it could be interesting in this project to look on. Yeah, so I don't think we kind of have a place where we can add issues and track for individual. I don't know if we should do that. As you said, you mentioned a roadmap. Yeah, I think. So, for example, the green reviews have a like a page here. So maybe we should also have something like that. I don't know.
If you like, yeah, sure, we can do that.
Yeah.
Do you don't have already access to add labels and stuff, right? So you don't have any access to the repository?
I don't think so.
Okay. And I'll check that.
Yeah.
Thanks. And also, Max asked a question in the chat. Is it pure Kubernetes or also in userland example Kira? I don't know what Kira is, but I think we're trying to focus on Kubernetes operators more than users first, if that makes sense.
So I guess Kida is something you can add to Kubernetes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
it's an operator which helps you to schedule up and down, for example, applications.
Yeah.
And it also has, for example, there's a KIDA carbon aware operator, which is developed from Microsoft and GSF, in Software Foundation.
Yeah, it has something carbon awareness, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I think that would be in scope. So very relevant to write about that, because it can be used to shape the demand.
Yeah, because you will always have like the dependencies between application and system or cluster, right? If you scale up applications or applications are badly configured, then your cluster has to do something with it, either scale or prevent this, and so on and so forth. That's why it's important that you clarify that you will include this user land. You will not take care, for example, about what's in the container, but how a container, for example, would be configured, things like that. So, because these dependencies between the user space and the infrastructure are ubiquitous. You will have it always, doesn't matter where you are. And so you need also best practices for this space.
Yeah. Marta?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for the clarification, Max. I think any ideas like that we think are worth exploring are probably good to just put in as an issue on the Kanban board, so that we can keep track of the work, because evaluating each of those tools and what kind of benefits it could have is going to take some time, so it's worth tracking. That makes sense.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess basically now is a fine time for just to get input on what areas and topics you think we should cover. We have this. I think we will, like, when we actually do the writing and the research, we will just start with adding it to this document, and then we can port it into Git and or into a web page afterwards, just to get rolling and reduce the like the overhead for getting started and contributing to the project. Yeah. So so any inputs for areas that we that should be covered in the guide, or the best practices guide? I think cluster auto-scaling is a relevant scaling, and which is basically right sizing, maybe, or workload right sizing, which is pod auto-scaling.
On the KubeCon, I had a very interesting discussion with one of the sustainable interested people who more clustered it around like general concepts rather than to name a detailed action. So we had discussion about refuse, reduce, right size, reschedule, reorder, and a few other stuff like this. Which I pretty much like, because, for example, I first thought like, hey, refuse, what do you want to refuse? Well, if you do the right configuration, setting resource limits and whatsoever. I mean, this is a big discussion if you should do it or not should do it. But if you run a policy engine which proves that you have always written, the demanded resources, for example, then you can already help on this level, for example, to prevent a false configuration.
So, yeah, so refuse, reduce, what was the rest? Sorry.
Wait, you can think about it, but there was like refuse,
yeah.
reduce, resize, reschedule, reschedule, repeat, and repair, but nothing to name it down. Just as a few ideas.
Okay, yeah.
For example, repeat was a quite interesting one that you should think, and this is actually more on an architectural level. Do you need that a container continuously run? Or can it be more like a job which always just spins up if you have a request on it, if your architecture allows it, right? And then this way you could keep your system smaller because you do not need to have continuously idle resources. And the repair perspective I also very much like on it, because I think this is something which we never talk or think about that much. In a larger extent, we can think about cluster or cube or podlets, how it's called, sprawling, for example. But also if you have idle resources which have problems spinning up, they continuously eat resources. But if you don't have the right measurements and the right activities done, they will eat resources forever until someone goes to kill it manually, for example.
Yeah.
Right. If you have, oh, sorry.
Oh, just go ahead.
Yeah, if you have your development cluster and somebody, developers don't really care about it that much, so they don't mind if they the stuff they deploy is in crash loop back off because it can't pull an image. It's still going to it's not going to run. The workload is not going to run, but it's still going to, I think, reserve the resources on the nodes, for example, right? That's not going to be used for anything else. So that's nice to think. The repair angle, I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. See you, Leo. Good. So I saw Dipankar wrote something about configuring Kubernetes, like the Kube API server and etcd. That's a good idea. Anything else? Any ideas?
We had the in the previous iteration, there's a, let me just share it in the chat. There was an older document about sorry, I can't talk and type at the same time there. There's an older document about best practices in scheduling, but it mentions things like optimizing container images. Yeah, which we're on the kind of border here, or yeah, resource limits and quotas. I don't think we necessarily. Thanks, Dipankar. Hopefully see you soon again. Not necessarily everything that we can reuse, but maybe some things here
yeah,
might
Yep.
be inspiring.
This was our first try to get the thing started.
Mm. But yeah, like optimizing container images, good idea. Could probably do something like it's more efficient to run like a what is called a low overhead container image than like a big one. So for example, using Flatcar or yeah. So, but it's kind of like at the border, because is it Kubernetes or is it just images?
I think it would make sense for you guys to have like a parking lot or something called borderlands or whatsoever. I like this wording somehow in this context, because dipping down into a container, this is a whole huge topic by itself, right?
Yeah.
I like to think about what are the right configurations which can be done on the Kubernetes side. For example, caching mechanisms, right? It makes more sense to cache more container maybe on site rather than continuously pull them. Pull mechanism is a configuration of the pod, of the deployment. It's also something which we should consider. But maybe we can really in an initial step, cut the container itself out. So container configuration or pod configuration, maybe we really need to be here precise with the naming, versus the container stuff. I think there we can draw a line for first step.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. So should I? Yeah, I think this is kind of like a brainstorm. So we'll just write stuff down, and then we can kind of see maybe some of the topics consolidate into one with each other, or yeah. Horizontal pod auto scaling. Yeah. So this is kind of like, it feels wrong. This is kind of like an answer to a question, but I haven't figured out what the question is to vertical pod outscaling.
I mean, that's always a difficult one, because you usually would go for vertical scaling rather than a horizontal one if your application can't go with multiple instances.
Yeah. Yeah, so it depends on the architecture, but yeah.
I somewhere saw, where was it? It was one of the KubeCon presentations. I need to find it. They did some interesting little research on bigger nodes versus smaller nodes and their overall power utilization, stuff like that. And they found a kind of Pareto optimum, where in some cases it literally makes a lot of sense to go for just the big ones. And in some cases it really makes sense just go for, no, not just, but mainly go for small ones. I have to look it up.
Yes, like go for large or small nodes.
Yeah, but also because of the right sizing problematic.
Yes, so.
Yep. Because yeah, I think the common advice is to use smaller nodes, because then they can scale up better, but also yeah, each node introduces an overhead. So if you have a lot of stateful, what's it, daemon sets, then having a lot of smaller nodes is literally a waste. because not much apart from daemon sets is going to fit on there. So it would be great to see more data to dig into that, because I feel this is the kind of advice that feels wrong a lot of the time.
Yeah, and if you kind of think about if you're underutilizing a lot of small nodes, then the sum of that utilization could run some quite large applications, but not because the application can't fit into one of the nodes, but if it was just one larger node, it could run an application, or have a capacity to run a large application. Yeah.
Well,
So I think that's probably kind of maybe cluster autoscaling or cluster right sizing.
It's actually a very interesting optimization problem.
Yeah, that's kind of some part of what I did in my master's thesis with carbon efficient carpenter, where it I guess picks a set of nodes that minimize the carbon impact of the cluster, and therein it considered if it should consolidate small nodes into larger nodes to reduce the carbon impact of the cluster.
Mm.
And generally, I think it showed that it was that larger nodes were more carbon efficient, because it could increase the resource utilization.
Yeah, and you get more for the power in the end.
Yeah. So yeah, and especially because I think at least in AWS, it's if you say you want a 2x node or a 2x instance or a 4x large instance, it's basically just different percentages of the same hardware. So it's not like it's a different machine or a different server with its own overhead. So for example, running 2 small nodes will not mean that you have to have 2 power what is it called? Yeah, so 2 small nodes is the same as just 2 small nodes is the same as 1 larger, but with worse resource utilization.
Yep.
Okay, anyways, any more ideas for topics? Should it be inside the scope, like picking a location with a low carbon intensity in the energy grid?
Yeah, I'm thinking about this one. So I pretty much like what is built. It has a dependency to WhatTime API, and you have to throw coins into the WhatTime API, as far as I know. So I think overall, it might make sense for when we write this thing together, giving a clear terminology. It's all about reducing the power consumption, because it will reduce the CO2 footprint, but we should not primarily focus on the CO2 footprint with the actions, because this correlation is always a little bit difficult,
But I guess in the end, we want to minimize the CO2 footprint.
Absolutely.
And not the power
Absolutely.
power consumption, because
Well, I mean, if you do the one, then it will reduce the other. But it would at least solve more or less the kind of question around KIDA, for example, so that you focus on the first point, like what is a good practice to reduce applications running around and just let them run when they are needed rather than to continuously running. And then in a second step, because it's so fast developing everything, maybe in 6 months, 12 months, there's enough other input for it where we can then shift stronger towards the carbon reduction.
Yeah, so maybe there are various steps inside one, for example. So KIDA, that could be kind of a way to automatically scale, and that would be a good start. And then if you want to do more, then you could scale, I don't know, based on the carbon impact in the area. Yeah. Marta?
Thanks. That's I find it a difficult question to answer, because on the one hand, just by switching, I don't know, just by switching a region, you can cut your emissions by 30%, let's say, right? That's a significant reduction. And then you can continue more by introducing all sorts of optimizations. But switching, so on the one hand, I just really want to have that. On the other hand, it does feel out of scope because the cloud region is not part of Kubernetes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but you could maybe give an introduction to it and spend a chapter towards it and say, like, look, you go, obviously different regions have different carbon footprint for their energy mix, which they have. And some countries have, overall, most countries have continuously more or less the same footprint, right? So if you really care, it makes sense that you architecturally decide already to go, let's say, to Sweden, rather than to run in the brownish Germany, in this regards. But this is like a long-term architectural decision. Because I'm not a fan of saying things like, oh, we need to shift depending on where is now the carbon footprint lower. It will make the things more complicated because it takes into account how heavy is the workload, how heavy is the data which needs to be transported, and so on and so forth. So, but I think it's absolutely reasonable to spend a chapter on infrastructure decisions, which include, okay, look, there's a difference between cloud provider and running it by yourself, maybe between infrastructure as a service provider. And obviously in this included, the region matters. So choose your region from the beginning wisely. If sustainability is a key principle in your architectural decisions. And then we can give maybe 1, 2, 3 additional example to round the thing up. But I think then you have pretty much covered this topic. It still stays in the context of what we are talking about, and has already a potentially high impact here.
Yeah. Good idea. I agree.
Yeah, I think that sounds good, especially with adding some background on the weight of early infrastructure decisions, because I think most of the people, it's a guess, that majority of people that are going to be reading what we make will not be in the process of setting up a new cluster from scratch.
Yeah.
I think I might be, obviously I might be wrong. It's finger in the air.
I guess when you're starting a startup and then it goes some months and then you want to run Kubernetes, I guess sustainability is not the first thing that comes to mind. Yeah, so it's probably existing clusters we're working with, unfortunately. Yeah. Any more ideas on what areas, topics that should be covered?
I think I would like to have just as a way of presenting just a little like a t-shirt size on each of those stuff. Like once we start figuring out the details of what you can do and so on, just have a little I don't know size of the effort required.
Yeah.
I think that could be nice to give people a little better understanding of what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah. Agree. Just to make it easier to just skim it through and say, okay, this one should be good for me, maybe. Maybe we actually already have quite a lot of stuff here. I think at least if it's just you and me, Marta, who will be writing it all, I think we have some good stuff, and we can of course always add to the list with more details.
Yeah, I think it's a great start. I don't think it's just going to be you and me writing it.
I hope yeah, others will join.
So the next steps, I guess, would be, since we have now, we should probably create tracking tickets for each of these. Should we? To capture org, or we can just decide pick whether we want to pick one and start looking into it, or one each, for example, or whether we want to look at each topic together. Yeah, just thinking about the next steps. I know I can go ahead and edit the project tracking and the project proposal issues, reflecting the feedback that we got earlier today.
Yeah.
So I know that's a to-do for me. And I'm thinking what else we should think about doing until the next meeting.
Yeah, I think it would be maybe a good idea to kind of maybe get a board for this all the tasks, and then create issues with each, and then maybe try and hear if someone are up to maybe just take one, right? Because that's more easy to get started and help out with this project. Yeah. So, and something else, my idea regarding like this, the bi-weekly meetings. So my idea was that basically we would use them to talk about the status of the sections that people have picked and how far they come, if there's anything blocking, and then get ideas into new sections, and maybe hear if some in the meeting are willing to take on new sections and work on those. Yeah. Good.
Sounds good. Max, were you trying to say something?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. My recommendation is to think about, beside the each and every topic which you have, how you would like to structure it overall, getting thoughts and ideas around it, because sometimes the things which we are writing down maybe doesn't fit in a structure which we can put, for example, on the website, for example. For sure, we can develop everything, but for a quick and easy quick start, you should have a look how usually the sub pages are created. Usually you have on the left side an index with a couple of headlines and folders practically, and then sub pages in it. But usually you also do not go too many levels down. right? You have one higher level and then filled it with some topics and so on. You should consider that. And yeah, it always helps to think a little bit about storytelling from one hand side. Like, what is the thing you want to tell someone when that person goes through that guide? Also, often guides are written in a way like, if you need this one, jump here. If you need that one, jump there. But this is like just a different perspective on the entry point. So it's always helpful also for you while writing when you have a flow, how you would go through that and build things step by step, maybe even on each other, right? And then you have a better feeling for, or sometimes it makes more sense what you want to write down, because then it's like embedded into a whole context rather than a standalone building block in some way. Otherwise, you end up practically for every part saying like, okay, it has dependencies for this one, it has dependencies for that one, and actually you need a prerequisite here too. It's good to write it down, you will have it anyway, but then it feels maybe, yeah, really like thrown alone in the middle of the ocean and hope that someone will pick it up there.
Yeah, yeah. So kind of maybe we should, like, it is important that we write maybe each section kind of independently to make sure that it makes sense and it's not just a list of stuff, and yeah, but it's a coherent piece of work.
Yeah, and maybe you can find a structure for it, that it feels always like consistent how you define it. You can have a look, for example, what the Green Software Foundation has done on their recommendation. I need to say, I personally do not like the way how it is written. It's too much structured. Like, that's the impact, one sentence. That's how it's done, one sentence, and so on. It's very short. It's not informative. But such a structure could maybe help also to, yeah, facilitate it and boil it down to what is really necessary.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like lowering the cognitive load from figuring out the structure, underlying structure. Yeah, we don't want to add cognitive load to people when they're already reading technical recommendations. Yeah, I really like that idea. We should spend some time thinking about that.
Yeah. So what now?
Do you need anything from me?
I think Leo said he would give us access to the repository so we could create a board, I think. Maybe. So I don't think we need you for that. Of course, I think we would like any help from you if you would like to collaborate with us on this.
Sure.
But of course, you have, like, being a co-chair, and you have probably a lot of other stuff you are doing.
I have one concrete thing. You mentioned discussions from KubeCon, and you mentioned a talk from KubeCon. I'm guessing these are not up on YouTube yet.
They are slowly getting uploaded. I saw
Nice.
maybe the first couple of talks.
If you could point us in the direction of what you think would be relevant, like you had concrete talks in mind, that would be really helpful. And then we can go from there. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, and I think all the to-dos that we noted down today, we can figure them out on Slack.
Yeah.
Because
Let's do that, and then maybe we should just start continue the discussion on Slack in the public channel to make sure that everyone can collaborate with us on
Mhm.
it. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much for your time today. This was great.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you too.
Thank
So
you. See ya. Bye bye.
see
Bye
ya.
bye.
Bye bye.